We just watched the sun rise across the bridges that stretched not just across the river between Manhattan and Brooklyn, but back through time. Ben Tucker's childhood in a part of Black New York, where families came north as a part of the Great Migration, to a time when to be Black and to become a cop was to experience systemic racism in a complex and sometimes paradoxical way.
I think generally nobody wants to talk about race. Race is uncomfortable. It makes people uncomfortable because it's too difficult a conversation to have.
I think that some police officers bring to their job an attitude that the members of minority groups in the areas where they are working are somehow different and create special problems and need special handling. And I believe that this is a mistake.
Not because people are comfortable that racism exists or that it impacts the way people interact with one another, but I think because they're confounded about what to do about it.
I believe that if they will just recognize that they are not dealing with skin color or language, but with human beings, and that people respond to courtesy, to respect, and efficient and professional law enforcement.
Ben Tucker has been a lawman for over 50 years.
Ben began his career in this department in November of 1969. And he began his career as a New York City police officer, so many did, walking the beat. He has worked on a national level in the area of substance abuse and community policing. Ben has been in charge of school safety in the city, served on the Surveying Complaint Review Board. He has a background in law, he's an attorney, and has been a teacher. In short, he has an intimate understanding of crime, drug abuse, youth, and the law.
Today, Ben Tucker is the police department's chief disciplinarian. He's known to be one of the department's sharpest minds, and it's a point of pride that he's one of its sharpest dressers.
I mean, I wear double-breasted suits all the time, right? That's just my thing. And in part because of, you watch some of these black and white films, Cary Grant, James Stewart, you watch any of these, Cagney, any of those guys, and you watch those old films, double-breasted was what they wore, and they always looked sharp. As a young cop, my trainee uniform, I had it tailored, had it stitched. I was going to be sharp. As a police officer, I was always that way. I figured out early on, if you look the part, people treat you differently. They respond to you differently. And it's true.
Ben Tucker presents himself as a role model. Back when he came on the job, other sharp-dressing, pragmatic, authoritative Black men of strong character were his role models.
When I was a trainee, when I was the TS operator in the 8-1 precinct, I'm working a 4 to 12. Who walks in but this figure, tall Black guy, overcoat, cashmere, cigar, hat, fedora. And when he walks in, somebody yells, "Attention." And I'm like, attention, And so he's somebody, right? And he was somebody. He walks in, he waves, and he goes up to the squad. And I look at the lieutenant and I say, "Hey, Lou," I said, "Who was that?" That was Chief Hill. He's a new 13th Division chief of detectives. And I was like, Chief Hill. And I'm thinking, this is a Black guy, Chief Hill. Remember the context, it's 1969, maybe 1970 now. Here's this guy, and here's this trainee, 18-year-old telephone switchboard operator, sees this guy come in, and I'm thinking, what are the possibilities? The job was relatively small. If you were Black in this job, pretty much everybody who was Black knew each other or of each other, particularly if you were going up through the ranks. Fast forward to 2 years ago, Jeremy Travis sends me an invitation to come up to John Jay when he was still president of John Jay. They were dedicating a classroom for Arthur Hill and working with the family. The family had a foundation in Artie's name. He had since passed away. And they were honoring him, and I spoke. And when I got up to speak, I said, listen, what a pleasure and an honor to see Arthur's wife, his daughters, and the rest of the family, and some friends, old-timers who I knew and recognized here to honor Arthur Hill. We always talk about standing on the shoulders of others and people mentoring young people and influencing young people. And I said, So for me, this is special for lots of reasons because Jeremy invited me to be part of the ceremony, but it's special for another reason that Jeremy isn't even aware of, and I told him that story. And I said, so, as a young kid, I remember Artie Hill influencing me and sending a message to me that I could be that person, that there were really no limits to what you could accomplish if you put your heart to it. So for me, and I think we have an obligation, and to the extent that we can, to influence people. I've had people tell me that I was the reason that they do what they do now. There's no greater compliment.
Ben Tucker takes us back to an early memory, a cold day in December in South Brooklyn. There was a white cop there, and he did not see Ben as a cop. Ben was on assignment in plain clothes as a community affairs officer.
We were having tensions in a number of schools in Brooklyn South as a result of school busing. And Brooklyn South, a lot of these schools and neighborhoods were mainly white. We had kids who were coming to these schools from minority neighborhoods, from Bed-Stuy, Brownsville, East New York. Lots of tension. I was working with Sam Campbell, who was, Sam was the community affairs officer in the 6-7. I was the community affairs officer in the 6-9, and we worked civilian clothes. Our job was to figure out how to tamp down some of the racial tension and bring groups together and mediate some of the tension and work with the school principal, work with the faculty, work with the community, and work with the students. We'd have these meetings, we'd have these discussions, and really try to bring the temperature down. And we flew all over the borough. So we might be at Madison, we might be at Lincoln, might be at Lafayette. Certainly South Shore was where I got my start there, and dealt with the issue initially when I first was transferred to the 6-9 in 70. They sent me there specifically to deal with that issue, those issues that were taking place as a liaison to the precinct commander and to the borough command. So we were familiar with the challenges. It was freezing. I was wearing a black raincoat, long coat. We had a meeting that morning with some of the students. We tried to keep in touch with them and have these sessions to take the temperature of what was happening in the school building and around the school building. Sammy and I are standing on the corner of Quentin Road and Nostrand Avenue. There was a candy store and down the block from the school. And we're standing there talking there was a sector, so because there had been tensions at the school and we had details there all the time for an extended period, media was out there pretty regularly, almost daily. And then we see some of these students coming down the block, some of whom we had just met with, right? And there was a bunch of them. I mean, it was like, I guess I estimate maybe between 20 and 30 students. And they're walking down in the middle of the street. They were coming in our direction. We believed they were coming down because that store on the corner was where the white kids hung out. So we stepped into the street and we asked them to, say, well, slow down, where you going? They had sticks in their hands, they had other items in their hands. And we said, just knock this off, let's chill out. As we're talking to them, we take some sticks from them and the leaders, and we're trying to get them to go back to school. This is not gonna help. And while we're having this conversation, some of the kids start throwing stuff, bottles, a couple of bottles, I remember. And within a split second, this whole Donnybrook breaks out. The officers, uniformed officers, out of the car, the other two officers. And there weren't that many officers involved, maybe 4 or 5 at that moment. Kids are running and nightsticks are flying. And there's a kid on the sidewalk, a young man. We were in the street, and there was a young man on the sidewalk. And I'm telling him, he was coming toward me. I said, listen, just keep going, head back up, get back to school. And as I'm telling him this, I feel this pain, right, on my hand. And so I turn around, I'm hit, right? It hurts. I turn around, and I'm grabbing my hand, and fingers dislocated, and I'm holding my hand, and I turn around, and there's an officer in uniform facing me, right? I'm standing 6 inches maybe away from him. before I could say anything, I hear Sam yell to him, "Hey, he's on the job." I see this guy, he's got his nightstick in his hand, and he's pumped up. And he's looking at me, and what he says is, when Sam says he's on the job, he says, "Well, F it, tell him to put his shield on." And Sam now is going over, he's approaching this car, and I'm telling him, I say, "Sam, no." Because we would have ended up in a, that wasn't going to end well. Plus, my hand's messed up, So I say to Sam, I said, "No, listen, man, let's just go back to the headquarters. We got to make a report, and I need to go to the hospital." The young man that I was saying, go back to the school, he says to me, he said, "See?" He says, "You work for them. You work with them, and this is, they don't have any respect for you," or something to that effect. But it was clear that he got what was going on, and he said, "What are you kidding? Basically, you're black, and so you're no different than we are."
Ben Tucker did not know whether the officer was racist or out of control, or both. But what he did know was that man was not cut out to be a police officer. 2 years later, that man left the job.
What he should have said was, "I didn't know he was on the job. I'm sorry." And that would have been fine. But he didn't. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to, if you made a mistake, own up to it, and, that's the way it should be. I think we've made a lot of progress. We certainly remind our officers today, and we harp on it and insist that, and they're required to, if Ben Tucker is doing something that he shouldn't be doing. And we see officers engage in that conduct, which is a good thing. Most recent case that I can think of is the case in Rockaway where the Donnybrook on the boardwalk, and you saw the officer tap the officer and get him in check. And so that was a good thing. That's what we should do for each other. First of all, it's the way we keep our legitimacy in terms of the public's perspective of who we are as police officers. But also, it's just the right thing to do. To witness an officer doing something wrong and not take action yourself, to let it just happen, is, that should never happen.
If you sense a little bit of the patriarch in Ben Tucker's style and voice, it was a lifetime in the making.
When I was a kid, I was always hustling. When I was turned 14, I was delivering the World Telegram and Sun, not making a lot of money, and I was shining shoes before that. At my shoe shine box. A lot of my friends, we had shoe shine boxes. You can go out and stand on the corner, and they get to know you, and people come by and they throw their foot up there, and you polish them up, and you get paid, and they move on. So entrepreneurial but also, work ethic is sort of drove me. Parents were divorced, separated certainly, and I was taking care of my mom, and so I was going to school and working, trying to play basketball when I could. Then I became the janitor of my church, Lafayette Avenue Presbyterian Church, when I was about 15. I did that for about a year and a half, a little bit longer, and it was a great job. And I was making like $90 a week, $100 a week, keeping the church pristine. My father, although he was separated from my mother, he never really left the neighborhood, so my father used to manage supermarkets. We had this interesting relationship. It wasn't like father and son as much as it was, we were, friends, I guess. My mother, single parent, I had 3 older sisters. She worked every day until she was seriously injured in a car accident when I was about 10. And throughout my teenage years, she was bedridden, and we with my sister, the younger of my sisters who was still at home, we were taking care of my mom.
That pragmatic approach led to this policing career, to a man whose job now is discipline, risk, the use of force, managing cops, and recruiting cops.
We had a discussion about recruitment yesterday. One of the meetings this morning with the PC is he cares about it deeply, is about recruitment. And so we will figure it out. I believe strongly in our pipeline. Having youth councils and explorer programs and cadet programs are invaluable because we keep the kids in our sphere from touching them earlier in life, and you get them engaged.
When Ben Tucker addresses a class of new recruits, he tells them that they will be held accountable. He tells a story to highlight a cop's privilege to serve the community.
I'm driving home from work one day, and I stop at the light for about 45 seconds, maybe almost a minute, on Fifth Avenue and St. John's Place. And there's a cop standing on the corner, up against the building line in uniform, young cop. And there's a woman crossing the street with a little boy. And when they cross the street, the little boy jumps up on the sidewalk, and when his feet hit the sidewalk, he looks up and sees the officer. And he's looking at the officer, and he's walking around in front of the officer and looking at his gun, and he's looking up at him, and the cop never moves. Cop's standing there, and I'm in my car watching this, and I'm thinking, like, say something to this kid. I'm like, come on, what are you doing? And he never moves. The mother walks up, takes the kid by the hand, and they walk down the street. And I said, and I'm sure they're thinking, what the hell is he talking about? And I say to them, I said, so I wasn't the only one watching this. There were other people on the street. There's a supermarket, Key Food supermarket right there, lots of activity. But this cop never moved. And it was I said, so first thing I'll tell you is you don't want to be that cop. The thing about being a cop is you are out there, people know exactly who you are, you're in this uniform, and your job is, you're part of the community. You're not part of the building, you're not part of, your feet are not, cemented to the ground. You gotta engage. I said he missed an opportunity there that would have been worth $1 million. He could bent down, he could have smiled at the kid, he could have put his hat on his head, he could have, just tapped him on the shoulder, smiled at him. Any one of those things would have been a home run. His mom would have been pleased. This is a nice cop. It's about that. That's as simple, and that's what this job is. That's what it's about. So that's my advice to you. Don't ever be that cop, and you'll be okay.